So you probably saw the title of this video and thought, what on earth is the dog gun? What is this archetype you're talking about? And it revolves around Summoned Hound. After playing Charlie Kane, I am aware that Summoned Hound is very good, provided you meet certain criteria which are very hard for Mystic 1 characters to meet. The first criteria you need to meet for Summoned Hound is you don't need your ally slot. The second criteria you need to meet is that you don't need your arcane slot. The third is that you need to be boosting your book passively, because if you're actually just investigating at 5, it's not that good. So we need to be talking about a Clover that has some sort of way of boosting their book and their hand slots or something like that. And lastly, the fourth criteria, the most important criteria, is you have to cheat out this additional cost. You cannot do this if you play it normally and you put the Unbound Beast into your deck, because then the dog gets mad. You set the Summoned Hound aside, out of play, it's gone forever, but this weakness is now in your deck and it's going to be there forever. So this is obviously pretty suboptimal. You don't want to spend experience and card slots and ally slots and arcane slots and all this deck construction nonsense and be left with this at the end of the day. You need to avoid this at all costs. Before Scarlet Keys, the only way to do that was a chance encounter 2. You put that asset into play. You do not play it. That is legally different, and you're allowed to get the Summoned Hound into the game without actually paying that additional cost. You still have to be someone with passive book boost that doesn't value these slots, and that's a bit of a problem. But suddenly, it is possible to play this card and have it work, and Charlie Hound was the perfect storm of terrible stat line, access to magnifying glasses, access to this combo. He got to do it. So you know the dog part now, but it is a dog gun. So what's the gun? Well, this is a little bit underwhelming because there's no image, but I assure you, the Hyperphysical Shotcaster is a firearm. Specifically, it's this firearm. It's a customizable weapon, and it doesn't do anything initially. It comes into play with 4 Aether, and you can spend an action to resolve a manifest ability on it, but it doesn't have any of those by default, and as a lightning bolt, you can change its form, but you don't have any of those either. So you start off with a gun that does nothing. Now, coming down to the customization options, you can see all different forms. You can use your highest skill to attack, to investigate, to evade. You can use it to just like remove a treachery from play sometimes. You can get 2 additional Aether. You can use anything you're doing with +2 skill value. All of that's really cool. Those are a lot of different things. And the one that usually gets overlooked is Matter Weaver. Because if I'm putting experience into a customizable card that takes up a hand slot, I'm not about to use it as emergency cash. I can get emergency cash much easier than going through the trouble of Matter Weaver. And to read it aloud, Matter Weaver gives Hyperphysical Shotcaster this form, and now it has the manifest ability. Choose an asset in your hand and test any skill X where X is that asset's cost. If you succeed, play that asset at no cost. Those are the key words we're looking for. Because coming back to the dog, it is an additional cost. And barring some insane rules legalese that is up there with fighting and attacking are not the same thing, that means that the Hyperphysical Shotcaster can put Summoned Hound into play without shuffling the weakness in. So suddenly, we've got a gun that shoots dogs. And it does a lot of other stuff. All that other stuff is super useful, but usually doesn't warrant the deck slot and the experience and the resources and all of that in most decks. But now that we can use it to cheat the dog out, that changes. Now there's a reason to put it in the deck and spend experience upgrading it, because it's also enabling a really strong combo. We can go look at every single character with Mystic 1 and check, can you get by with 1 hand slot, no arcane slots, and 1 ally slot provided you bought both charismas? That is a very big ask, and in addition, they need to be a character that focuses on boosting book and has a usable book skill, and we're talking about mystics, and the pool of people this actually works in is getting smaller with every word I say. I've gone through every single person with mystic access, well, experienced mystic access, and I'm convinced that Charlie Kane is still the best way to use Summoned Hound in a deck, but I think there are 2 characters that can actually do this, Luke being one of them. There have always been decks that tried to use Luke as a 3-book seeker and make it work, and I've never really been on board with that. I think being a 4-head mystic is better than being a 3-book seeker, and I think it's easier to enable this 4-head than this 3-book, just no matter how I look at it. In addition, if you have access to Arcane Research, it's hard for me to give up 14 free experience over the course of a campaign. That does a lot to tilt the deck in favor of spells. But if you had some dogs investigating at base 5 to make you a lot better at your job, then suddenly maybe the math gets a little bit different, and there's a compelling reason to look back at Book Luke. Now, the issue here is that you have a hand slot and virtually no ally slots, making this pretty awkward. And Book Luke could still make use of his head with Hawkeye folding cameras and maybe run some spells, but this build can't. You can still use the gun. And for many characters, using the gun, one of the appeals of it is you can investigate with your head, and you don't need your arcane slots to do that anymore. But Luke's investigating with his book already, so that's not actually useful to us in any capacity, and instead we'd be looking at using it to shoot, using it to cheat things out, treachery test, and just getting more of it. Most of these upgrades here are very unimportant to us, to be honest. Mainly it's just Matter Weaver and Fight. This is a very cheap deck for a final deck. This is full bells and whistles. And in addition to it being a full deck, you could easily cut 6 experience from this gun that just didn't matter. This is a 29 experience feature complete deck with all the bells and whistles short of observed. And I run Milan as well, even though I don't have 4 ally slots, because once the Summoned Hounds are in play, you would like to throw out your Rook, you won't need the Health Soak anymore, and put Milan in play just to boost your book. You've got 1 hand slot for a Hawkeye folding camera, 1 neck slot for a Hubert's Key, 1 tarot slot for a death. And the rest of the deck is just generically good stuff. There's a very real argument for cutting Spectral Razor, Read the Signs, or Shortcut, and putting in something like Preposterous Sketches to draw harder looking for this stuff. I definitely agree with that sentiment, but I think this actually does have like some weird merit to it. The main reason I'm making this video isn't because I think this particular deck is the best build of Luke, but because it's an archetype I didn't even know was possible, and it's got the best name in the world. It's the GunDog archetype. Alright, it's probably the dog gun archetype, but GunDog sounds way better, and I'm not changing this hashtag, I'm keeping the label. Patrice is, funnily enough, the other character I think makes a case for doing this now. She already had the ability to do it with Summoned Hound and a chance encounter, but you run the risk of drawing a chance encounter first and not being able to actually play your dogs until like turn 14, and considering these take up all of your arcane slots and ally slots, it kind of warps your deck a lot, and this is a 1, 2, 3, 6, 12 experience combo for the Charismas, the Hounds, and the chance encounters. So maybe doing nothing until your second deck cycle starting on around turn 10 is pretty rough. And in fact, you might do nothing on your second deck cycle too. It's just really, really RNG if you get this to work, but you've warped your deck around it and that's a problem. With the addition of the gun though, now the only way to fail to get Summoned Hound into play is you have to draw a chance encounter first, Summoned Hound second, Shotcaster last. The odds that you get no hounds are minuscule, completely negligible. The odds that you get 1 hound only are still not that high. You're very likely to see chance encounter after the hound or Shotcaster before the hounds. And again, I'm not convinced this is the best build of Patrice. This is 12 experience in Patrice. It's like a solid third of the deck list, and it's taking up your arcane slots, which normally Patrice gets a lot of value out of. She'll run a Shriveling to deal with her weakness, so now she can flex fight. She'll run a Clairvoyance to help get clues, and it opens up things like Guts to be better cards. And without those arcane assets, you're putting a lot of weight onto these hounds to make up the lost value. They can, the hounds are very good, but I'm not convinced this is better than a normal Patrice build, and it definitely seems more prone to RNG. It would appear that I've edited my original Patrice deck instead of cloning it. So I can't show you what I would call a normal Patrice deck at this exact moment in time. I need to go make my new one. Here we go. Here's what I would call a normal Patrice build in this day and age. I think she got a lot of buffs out of Scarlet Keys, the pocket multi-tools, out of Crossroads and Nature of the Beast. I also think she got a lot better with Prophetic being added back in Edge of the Earth. And I think this deck is probably just better than janky dog gun nonsense again. But again, the fact that this exists is just weird and interesting to me, and I really haven't seen anyone talking about it. I don't remember why I was down here reading the conversation about the gun, but somebody, thank you Vitanufi, was like, hey, doesn't this work on the dogs? And it would seem that they're right, which is really cool. And something I hadn't realized, but they point out here, Summoned Servitor would also apply, so theoretically you could fit that into those decks as movement tech as well now. Summoned Servitor is not the best card, but like Summoned Hound, it gets a lot better when you can cheat past its initial cost. But yeah, this is just a short video about a goofy archetype that I didn't know existed. You can buy the science gun and use it to shoot demon dogs. It's not just a chance encounter anymore, I guess the dog is just so confused it doesn't bother to fight back when you shoot it out of a gun. Anyways, I've been rather incoherent. I hope you enjoyed this weird overview of a very strange archetype that now exists. If you did, like, comment, subscribe, all that stuff really does help the channel grow, and I'll see you in the next one.